That is what you deserve. Those words still echo in my ears, a sound that refuses to fade. My name is Zenobia Washington. I am 59 years old, and this is the story I kept locked in silence for months until the silence itself became unbearable. That night at my son Orion's wedding reception, his new mother-in-law, Serafina, threw a bowl of piping hot gumbo directly into my face. I felt the searing heat pierce my skin, the spices burning my eyes, the thick broth dripping down my ivory silk blouse. But what burned me more than the soup was the smile. That calm, almost satisfied smile she wore as she looked at me with narrowed eyes, as if she had just done something she had been waiting to do for years. That is what you deserve, she repeated with a firm voice, lifting her chin. The banquet hall fell silent. Every guest looked down at their plates. No one moved. No one said a word except for my son Orion, my only child, the boy I raised alone after his father abandoned us, the man to whom I gave everything I had. I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I simply took the linen napkin from my lap, wiped my burning face with all the dignity I had left, and stood up from my chair without making a sound. I walked toward the double doors with my back straight, even though inside every part of me was trembling. But before I left that building, I did something no one expected. I took my cell phone out of my clutch, dialed a number I had saved weeks ago, and said just 3 words. It is time. Then I hung up. I closed the door softly behind me. No one followed me. No one asked anything. I got into my car, started the engine, and as I drove through the dark streets of Buckhead, back toward my quiet apartment in the West End, a single question spun in my head. How did I get here? There was a time when I believed a son's love was forever. There was a time when I trusted. But that night, with my face burning and my heart broken, I understood something I never thought I'd have to learn. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who betray us the deepest, and sometimes silence is the only weapon we have left. What happened after that phone call is something they will never forget. But to understand why I did what I did, I must first tell you how it all started. How a mother who gave everything ended up humiliated in front of a room full of strangers. And how I discovered too late that my son was keeping a secret that would change everything. Sometimes we trust the wrong people too much. Have you ever been disappointed by someone you loved? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to read it. 3 years ago, my life was different. Not perfect, but mine. I lived in a spacious apartment in the West End of Atlanta, with a balcony full of red geraniums and bougainvillea that I watered myself every morning. I had my routine. Strong brewed coffee at 7, sweet potato pastries from Mr. Henderson's bakery on the corner, and then I would open my small fine tailoring shop on the ground floor of the building. I wasn't rich, but I didn't need to be. After Orion's father left us when my son was barely 5 years old, I learned something that many women take decades to understand. That one can sustain an entire life with her own 2 hands without asking anyone for permission. I sewed wedding gowns, prom dresses, and embroidered blouses for church ladies who wanted to look elegant without shouting about their money. My hands knew every stitch, every hem, every secret a fabric keeps when you treat it with patience. Orion grew up seeing that. He saw me get up at 5 in the morning to finish an order. He saw me sew until my fingers bled. He saw me cry from exhaustion over the singer machine that had belonged to my grandmother, and then dry my tears and keep going. Mama, when I grow up, I'm gonna work hard so you can rest, he would tell me with his big, serious eyes, while I made him breakfast before school. And I believed him because Orion was always a good boy, responsible, affectionate. He studied without me having to ask, got good grades. On Sundays, he helped me clean the shop and asked me things about fabrics, about colors, about how I knew which dress each client needed. Because I listened to them, baby, I would tell him. He would nod thoughtfully and then go play basketball with the neighborhood kids. When he turned 18 and went to study business administration at Morehouse College, I felt that every sacrifice had been worth it. My son was going to have what I never had, a career, a degree, a future without back pain or numb fingers. I worked double, triple shifts. I sewed dresses for weddings of families who would never invite me to their tables, but who paid well. I saved every dollar, denied myself help, Denied myself loans because I wanted Orion to finish college without owing anyone anything. And he did. He graduated with honors, got a job at a top real estate firm. He started earning well, wearing suits that I tailored for him myself, bringing me flowers every Sunday when he came for lunch. "Thank you, Mama," he would say, kissing my forehead. "Everything I am is because of you." And I felt complete until he met Clementina. The first time Orion talked to me about her, I noticed something different in his voice, a new emotion, a shine in his eyes I had never seen. "She's special, Mama. Very special." Clementina was the only daughter of a wealthy family from Buckhead. Her father owned a chain of hardware supply stores. Her mother, Serafina, was one of those women who had never worked a day in her life, but knew how to give orders like a general. When Orion told me he wanted to introduce me to her, I put on my best dress, the navy blue one, with embroidery on the collar that I had made for a distant cousin's wedding. I fixed my hair, put on the pearl earrings that had been my mother's. I wanted to make a good impression. The meeting was at a restaurant in Buckhead that I would never have chosen. Too elegant, too expensive. But Orion insisted, "I want you to get to know each other well, Mama." Clementina arrived in an impeccable white dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was pretty, polite, but cold. We talked about unimportant things. The weather, her career in interior design, the wedding plans she was already imagining, even though she and Orion had only been dating for 6 months. I smiled, nodded, asked all the right questions. But something in my stomach twisted when she said, "My mother is anxious to meet you, Miss Zenobia." The way she said Miss Zenobia sounded strange, as if my name needed a title to exist in her world. And I wanted to believe him because back then, I still believed that a son's love was stronger than anything else. I still believed that what we had built together, just the two of us, for so many years, was unbreakable. I didn't know yet that some women view other women as enemies from the very first moment. And I didn't know yet that Serafina had already decided, long before meeting me, that I wasn't enough for her family. He told me this in the car. I smiled, but deep down, a small, cold voice whispered something I didn't want to hear. That girl is lying, and Serafina is too. 3 months later, they invited me to dinner at their house. That was when everything started to crack. Serafina's house in Buckhead was exactly as I imagined. Massive, cold, and full of things nobody needs. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, oil paintings, and gold frames. Furniture that looked like it came straight out of a decor magazine. So perfect it was scary to dirty it just by looking. When Orion and I arrived that night, Serafina received us at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Zenobia, how nice to see you," she said, giving me 2 air kisses without really touching my cheek. But I didn't feel at home. Clementina appeared from the staircase, radiant in a pale pink dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. She greeted me with the same polite, empty smile as always. "Miss Zenobia, how nice you look." Again, that Miss Zenobia, as if my name only existed with that prefix that made me feel old, foreign from another world. Serafina's husband, Reginald, was a large man with a raspy voice who barely shook my hand before returning to his armchair in front of the television. He didn't say much all night, just grunted occasionally and drank scotch. Orion seemed happy, comfortable, as if that house were more his than our small apartment where he had grown up. That hurt me more than I wanted to admit. Dinner was served by a young housekeeper who went in and out of the kitchen without making a sound, eyes downcast. Serafina didn't even look at her when she asked for something. More water and bring the bread. I tried to smile at the girl when she served me. She gave me a quick, almost grateful look before disappearing again. The conversation during dinner was tense from the start. Serafina talked about her friends at the country club, the vacation they were planning to Hilton Head, the new SUV Reginald had bought. "Because one can't just drive around in anything, right, Zenobia?" she said with a light laugh. "One has to maintain a certain level." I nodded without knowing what to say. Clementina intervened, touching Orion's arm with a possessive gesture. "Mama, I already told Orion that when we get married, he has to think about a bigger car. That car he has is very modest." Orion laughed uncomfortably.
The car is fine, babe. It serves me well. But we're going to have children, aren't we? Clementina insisted with a sugary voice. We need space, safety. Besides, my dad can help you with the down payment. I felt a knot in my stomach. My son had bought that car with his own money. I had watched him work hard to get it, and now this girl was talking about it as if it were an embarrassment. I think Orion knows what is best for him, I said with a calm but firm voice. Serafina stared at me for the first time all night. Of course, Zenobia, Orion is a very smart young man. That's why I'm sure he'll make the right decisions for his future, for his new family. The way she said his new family was like a silent slap, as if I no longer formed part of that future. Orion said nothing, just kept eating with his head down, and I understood something terrible in that moment. My son was letting them push me aside. Serafina kept talking. Now about the wedding. Clementina and I are already looking at churches. The wedding will be at the cathedral, of course. It's where my parents got married, my grandparents, the whole family, and the reception at the St. Regis. Nothing too ostentatious, but elegant, because things must be done properly, right? I nodded, feeling my throat close up. No one had asked me anything. No one had included me in these plans. It was as if my son's wedding didn't belong to me. Serafina asked suddenly with that fake smile. Do you like the idea? It sounds beautiful, I said, forcing a smile. The important thing is that Orion and Clementina are happy. Exactly, she said, raising her wine glass. The important thing is that they are happy and that they start well without burdens. Without burdens. The word hung in the air like poison. Clementina got up to go to the bathroom. Reginald fell asleep in his armchair, and Serafina took that moment to lean toward me, her voice low but clear. Zenobia, you seem like a reasonable woman, so I'm going to be direct with you. Orion is a good boy, but he's accustomed to a certain life, a simple life, and that's fine. But now he is going to be part of our family, and our family has expectations. Expectations, I repeated, feeling the heat rise up my neck.
Yes, expectations. Clementina needs stability, a husband who can provide, and Orion needs to focus on his future, not on the past. Her eyes bored into me. The past? I whispered. Don't misunderstand me, Zenobia. I know you've done a lot for your son. That is admirable. But now it is time for him to fly alone, without strings, without emotional dependencies. I felt as if she had stabbed a knife into my chest. I have never been a burden to my son, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Of course not, she said, smiling. I couldn't respond because at that moment, Clementina returned from the bathroom. Orion started smiling again as if nothing had happened, and the housekeeper brought dessert. Crème brûlée. I didn't taste a bite. When dinner ended, Serafina gave me a small box. A little detail, Zenobia. So you think of us. Inside was a fine china teacup, white with gold rims, elegant, expensive, cold. Thank you, I said without looking her in the eyes. In the car on the way back to my apartment, Orion was quiet. So was I. Finally, when we arrived in front of my building, he broke the silence. I looked at him, searching his eyes for the boy he used to be, the boy who hugged me and called me his hero. But that boy wasn't there anymore. She seems like a strong woman, I said, choosing my words carefully. Yes, he replied, smiling. She's incredible. She and Clementina are very close. It's nice to see that. And us? I wanted to scream. We aren't close anymore. But I said nothing. I just got out of the car, said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek, and walked up the stairs to my empty apartment. That night, while I brewed coffee in my old pot and looked out the window at the city lights, I held the cup Serafina had given me. It was beautiful, perfect. But when I brought it to my lips, I couldn't drink the coffee I had just poured because that cup wasn't a gift. It was a message. You don't belong in our world. I left it on the table untouched and went back to grabbing my old stoneware mug, the one I had used every morning for years. That one was mine. That one knew the taste of my life. And as I drank my coffee in silence, a question began to grow inside me like a dark weed. How far would this woman go to get me out of my son's life?
I didn't know yet, but I would soon find out. While I tell all this, I wonder where you are listening from. Write the name of your city in the comments. The following months were like walking barefoot on broken glass. Every step hurt, but I kept moving forward, smiling, telling myself that everything would be okay, that it was normal, that this is how things are when a son gets married, that I had to learn to let go. But the truth is, they weren't letting me let go. They were ripping me away. Orion started visiting less before. He came every Sunday without fail. He'd arrive with pastries. He'd help me move furniture to clean. He'd stay to eat and tell me all about his week. But after that dinner at Serafina's house, the visits became bi-weekly, then monthly, then sporadic, always with the same excuse. Sorry, Mama. Clementina and I had plans with her family. Sorry, Mama. Serafina invited us to lunch at the club. Sorry, Mama. We have to see about the wedding. Always Clementina. Always Serafina. Always them. I said it was fine, that I understood that he was busy, but inside something was dying little by little. One afternoon, Orion called to tell me that Clementina wanted me to go with them to choose the wedding dress. I asked, my heart jumping in my chest. Yes, Mama, Clementina insisted. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Maybe I had been wrong about Clementina. Maybe she did want to include me. Maybe it was all a matter of giving it time. On the day of the appointment, I arrived half an hour early at the boutique, an elegant shop in Buckhead with dresses that cost what I earned in 6 months.
Clementina arrived late, accompanied by Serafina and 3 friends who wouldn't stop laughing and taking photos with their phones. Miss Zenobia, Clementina said, kissing my cheek. I'm so glad you came. I sat on a velvet sofa while she tried on dress after dress. All beautiful, all expensive, all looking the same to my eyes. The friends applauded. Serafina gave orders to the shop assistant, and I sat there quiet without anyone asking me anything, until Clementina came out in a French lace dress, strapless with an endless train. She asked, twirling in front of the mirror. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath and told the truth. It is beautiful, but I think the strapless cut doesn't flatter you as much. You have delicate shoulders. A dress with lace sleeves or thin straps would highlight your figure better. The silence was immediate. The friends stopped smiling. Serafina looked at me with cold eyes, and Clementina let out a nervous laugh. Oh well, it's just that this type of dress is what's in fashion. Miss Zenobia, I don't know if you are very up to date with trends. Her friends laughed quietly, but loud enough for me to hear. Serafina stood up and put a hand on Clementina's shoulder. My baby, you look spectacular in everything. Don't worry, this dress is perfect. We're taking it. Clementina smiled, relieved. Yes, Mama. You're right, Mama. Clementina had called Serafina Mama, and she still called me Miss Zenobia. I stayed seated on that invisible velvet sofa while they kept talking about veils, headpieces, and designer shoes. No one asked me anything again. When we left the boutique, Orion was waiting for us outside. Clementina ran to him and showed him photos of the dress. Isn't it true? I'm going to look precious, love. You're going to be the most beautiful bride in the world, he said, kissing her. I hung back, clutching my purse, feeling like a shadow. Orion finally saw me. How did it go, Mama? It's lovely, I said, forcing a smile. Thank you for coming. I know this is important to Clementina and to you, I wanted to shout. But I just nodded. Of course, baby. That's what I'm here for. Serafina approached, took Orion by the arm, and said in a soft voice, Orion, will you join us for lunch? Clementina asked, looking at me with that polite, empty smile. Before I could answer, Serafina said, Oh no, my dear. Surely Zenobia is tired. Besides, we are going to talk about very specific organizational things. We don't want to bore her. Orion said nothing. He didn't defend me, didn't insist, didn't say, My mother is coming with us. He just said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek and left with them. I stood on the sidewalk watching them walk away, and for the first time, I cried in public. Not much, just a few quick tears that I wiped with the back of my hand before anyone saw me. I took the bus back to my apartment. I didn't want to spend money on an Uber. When I got home, I made coffee in my stoneware mug.
The same one as always, the one that knew the taste of my life. The china cup Serafina had given me was still on the table, untouched, gathering dust. I looked at it for a long time, and something inside me whispered, "This isn't going to get better." But I didn't want to listen, because I still believed that a son's love was stronger than any external influence. I still believed that Orion was going to wake up, that he was going to realize that he was going to go back to being the boy who hugged me and called me his hero. So I kept going. I kept smiling when they excluded me, when everything was wrong. I kept swallowing the pain so as not to be a problem, so as not to be a burden, so as not to fulfill the prophecy Serafina had planted in my son's mind. Your mother is going to suffocate you if you don't distance yourself. 2 weeks later, Orion invited me to dinner. Just the two of us like before. I was so excited. I arrived half an hour early at the restaurant. I had dressed with care.
I wore a burgundy dress that I had sewn myself with discreet embroidery on the collar. I wanted my son to feel proud of me. But when he arrived, he wasn't alone. Clementina was with him. "Sorry, Mama. Clementina wanted to join us. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not," I lied. Throughout dinner, Clementina talked non-stop about the wedding, about the honeymoon they were planning in Bora Bora, about the condo her father was going to give them as a wedding gift. "It's in Buckhead, Miss Zenobia. 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, and a terrace with an incredible view. My dad says it's important to start well." Orion looked happy. I just smiled. And when the check came, Orion took out his wallet and said something that split my heart in two. "Mama, can you lend me $2,000? I spent a lot this month on wedding stuff and I'm a little tight." $2,000? I didn't have 2,000 extra dollars. I barely had enough to pay my rent and the shop expenses, but I took out the money I had saved for the electricity bill in emergencies, and I gave it to him. "Of course, son. Don't worry." "Thanks, Mama. I'll pay you back next month." He never paid me back, and I never asked him for it because in that moment, I understood something terrible. I was no longer his mother. I was his bank, his safety net, his plan B. But I was no longer the most important person in his life. That night when I returned to my apartment, I sat in front of the window with my coffee and looked at the city lights, wondering how I had ended up there. How a woman who had given everything, who had sacrificed her youth, her health, her entire life for a son, could end up feeling so invisible. But I still didn't know the truth. I still didn't know that everything that had happened up to that moment was just the beginning. My only son, Orion, was not just being distant. He was being manipulated. A week before the wedding, I discovered the secret he had been keeping. I received a frantic call from a former client who worked at the bank where Orion held his accounts. He told me Orion had taken out a massive loan, putting up my shop, the one I had worked 40 years to own, as collateral. When I confronted Orion, he couldn't look me in the eye. "Serafina said it was a temporary investment, Mama. We needed to show a certain level of wealth to get the condo in Buckhead." I asked, my heart sinking. He just walked away. That was the moment I realized Serafina wasn't just trying to move me aside. She was trying to erase me and take everything I had built. I spent the next few days in a fog of grief, but I didn't sit idle. I called an old friend, a private investigator, and asked him to look into the hardware supply chain the family supposedly owned. What he found was the weapon I needed. Serafina's family was broke. The night of the wedding arrived. I sat at that table feeling the weight of the betrayal. When Serafina threw that bowl of gumbo into my face, it wasn't an accident or a moment of passion. It was her final act of dominance. She thought she had won. She thought Orion's silence meant I was defeated. As I walked out of that hall, wiping the spices from my eyes, I pulled out my phone. "It is time," I said to my investigator and my lawyer. I drove home, not to cry, but to wait. I knew that within hours, the wedding gift condo would be flagged. I had filed an emergency injunction regarding the shop's collateral, proving Orion had forged my secondary signature to secure that loan. The fallout was swifter than anyone expected. 2 days into their honeymoon, Orion and Clementina were called back. The bank had frozen the accounts. The hardware stores were being audited for tax evasion. Information my investigator had turned over to the authorities. Serafina called me, screaming, her refined, buckhead voice replaced by a shrill, desperate tone. "What have you done, you bitter woman?"
"No, Serafina," I said calmly, sipping coffee from my old stoneware mug. "I saved my shop." Orion came to my apartment a week later. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He told me Clementina had already filed for an annulment when she realized the money was gone. Her mother was facing fraud charges. He was facing a massive debt and a ruined reputation. "Mama, I'm so sorry," he sobbed, kneeling at my feet just like he used to when he was a boy. I thought I was building a future. I looked at my son. I loved him. But the man who sat at that wedding table and said, "She's right, Mama," had to face the consequences. "I won't let you go to jail for the forgery, Orion," I said. "I've worked it out with the bank because I paid the debt using my life savings. But the shop is no longer yours to inherit." I didn't take him back into my home. He had to find a small studio apartment and start over from nothing, just like I did when his father left. Now I sit on my balcony in the West End, watering my geraniums. The silence in my life is no longer unbearable. It is peaceful. I still sew, but only for the people I love. I learned that you can give a child everything, but you cannot give them eyes to see the truth. They have to learn to see it for themselves, even if the lesson burns like hot gumbo. I chose myself, and for the first time in 59 years, that was exactly what I deserved.